Hey everyone, for today's video, I'm actually taking a brief interlude from poring over the Christine Farrell collection to take a look back at one of my favorite auctions of all time, the 1993 Sotheby's auction. This is one of the greatest comic auctions of all time, hands down. The material in this auction is practically unparalleled in the history of the hobby. Let's get started. First, a little background. This auction had a lot of heavy hitters working on it. Jerry Weiss was the big one. He was coordinating the auctions for Sotheby's as a consultant. This was very early in comic auctions. Now we have dozens and dozens a month, it seems like. But at this point, it was, they were rare, and they were doing one a year. And Jerry was, the person who was there coordinating them, sourcing material, serving as the, kind of face of the hobby, and also pulling in a bunch of people to help him. So he brought along a cast of comic book heavyweights to grade and catalog the amazing material. I could actually just do a video on the people who took part in these auctions behind the scenes for Christie's and Sotheby's, because it's a who's who of people who were involved in the hobby at that point. R.I.P. Jerry Weiss, by the way. He was always gracious with his time when I would ask him questions specifically about White Mountain. And we owe him so much in terms of the growth and history of the hobby. If you're ever in the Boston area, go to Million Year Picnic in Cambridge to celebrate his extraordinary legacy in a physical location. It's still there, decades in Harvard Square as an institution. So, very cool shop. By the way, they use the numeric grading at this point, so you'll see, 0 to 100 or 1 to 100, and the Overstreet Owl cards. So you'll see in some of the little notations, the owl notation, which is kind of funny because different paper starts at different levels of whiteness, so it's not really useful, but it was neat that they tried. So, leading the auction, so it's got 2 pages. I didn't even take a photo of the entire listing. It's 2 pages with a long, probably 2,000 word description. But leading the auction was the pay copy of Marvel Comics #1. If you've read the blog, if you've read my blog, I've talked about the pay copy a lot. The pay copy has been a subject of much discussion in the hobby for, as long as 30 years, right? As long as it's been around. And really, what a long, strange trip this book has had. From being at the top of the world in this auction, just like this hyped up, crazy book, to eventually holding the world record for a comic book sale, to being a hot potato that nobody wanted, that was like losing money or barely making any money every sale, to finally having a nice home for a while, and then making a bunch of money for whoever had held on to it for, I think, 17 years. So, but let's look at those sales. Let's talk through them. So, my listing for this is wrong. It has to be. I listed it for $40,000 when it sold at Sotheby's. The estimate is 70 to 80. So I just can't believe that that's correct. I must have noted that incorrectly. But I always try and fix these mistakes when I find them. So we'll see what the actual number was. The ones I know for sure, in 2003, it was sold to J.P. the Mint, who was coming into comics at the time, for $350,000. He set a new high for comic book sales that held on for a long time. 2006, when he got out of the hobby, he sold this for $201,000, so he kind of took a bath. Whoever bought it from him sold it for $204,000 the next year. Both of those sales were at Heritage. So with buyer's premium and whatever, that person took a bath. And then 2010, it sold for $227,000, which again, with buyer's premium, means that person took a bath. But whoever bought that did not take a bath, because eventually it turned into CGC 92, as you can see here, which sold at Comic Connect for $2.4 million. So all's well that ends well for that book, for sure. As an aside, if this book is actually worth $2.5 million of CGC 92, copy of Marvel Comics #1, the church copy, which is a 9.8, is worth, I don't know, $20 million. I have no idea. So I think this is a little aggressive price, but it's still fun to see. So I'm going to live with this one and ignore the fact that it extrapolates out to a $30 million for the Marvel Comics #1. I don't know. It's crazy when you start to project out. but still cool. Uh, I told you this is like the best auction ever, possibly. They sold the Watchmen 1 to 12 covers as a set. So for some context, the number one cover sold for $228,000. Now, obviously, it's the most iconic, one of the most iconic covers of all time, but still, it sold for $228,000 in 2019. I don't think any of these other ones, even if they're not as iconic as that number one, I don't think any of the other covers would sell for less than $100,000 these days. Maybe 11. It's kind of boring, but it's still a Watchmen cover, and how many of them are there? So the idea of selling them now as a set is just crazy. But as you'll see throughout this video, they did a lot of this, selling group lots of books or art that would be, auction highlights individually now. As a note, all of these covers, well, here's the full listing. So you'll see the estimate is $20,000 to $25,000. As a note, all of these covers have come up for sale at Heritage over the past 20 years. Some of them multiple times. But yeah, $20,000 to $25,000 estimate. It's pretty crazy. Next up, we've got the Amazing Fantasy 15 White Mountain Pedigree. So this is one of the biggest books in the hobby, historic book. And famously, I love to tell this anecdote. When Jerry, got this book in hand, Jerry Weist, who discovered the pedigree, got the book in hand, he heard the paper of the book pop as the pages separated when he opened it for the first time, which was apparently the first time it had been opened. So that's how fresh and new this book was. And it was one of the most important individual books in the hobby. I've talked about the Action 1. The Church Action 1 has changed the way that we think about what you pay for books and being aggressive and what quality means and what value could be. That's for the hobby as a whole. For Silver Age books, this book was the same. It was the first Silver Age book that sold for over $10,000 at San Diego in, I believe, 1990. I have to double check that date. And the result in this auction, $39,100, was a huge deal for a Silver Age book in 1993. I've heard, that like people got up and clapped. It was like one of those things. It was just so epic. So I would like to have been there. It would have been fun. This book, by the way, has sold several times since. So obviously there was that $10,000 sale at San Diego in 89, 90. The sale at Sotheby's where it sold for $39,000. Doug sold it for $150,000 at Pedigree. And then things kind of took a little bit of a beating, and it sold for Heritage the next year for $126,000, 2005. And then finally it sold in 2007 for $227,000 at Comic Link. Thankfully, it's been stowed away in a collection for the past 17 years and hasn't been passed around, as some of these books are. Like I was talking about the Curator, Amazing Fantasy 15, which has been sold a bunch. So this was a big White Mountain sale. So there's a bunch of White Mountain books in here, which is, you can kind of see why I was such a fan of White Mountain, because like as I matured in the hobby, these were the books, the Silver Age books that were the big money makers and the big headline grabbing books, including this one. Fantastic Four number 1, White Mountain Pedigree, graded 90 by the committee. So actually, more strictly graded than CGC at the time. So CGC has graded this 9.2. This is, one of my all-time favorite books, as I've mentioned before, and this is like one of my all-time favorite copies. Because, it's the White Mountain. It's gorgeous. This book has also traded hands over the past several years, and whoever last had it has done well for themselves. They might not get 1.5 million, because I think that's still a crazy number, but 500,000 plus is there for the taking, for sure. So some of the sales. So it sold for $27,000 at Sotheby's in this auction, which again was a crazy number and showed the power of the White Mountain Pedigree and how important Silver Age books could really move the needle. 2007, it sold for $100,000 at Metropolis. So just as a listing before they had Comic Connect. 2013, it sold for $191,000 at Heritage. 2014, it sold for 145,000 at Comic Link. You gotta love those. And I believe it's sat in a collection since. So whoever bought it from Comic Link has owned it since. So it's 10 years. That $145,000 has turned into at least $500,000 plus. So goodbye. And honestly, it's just I love the book, and I'm jealous that I don't own it. So here's what I was talking about with these bulk lots, right? Here's a crazy one. Fantastic Four 2 to 10, White Mountain, average grade 82, which is very strict. You'll see in a second. I found some of these books. $14,000 to $19,000 estimate, which is just, for the value that you'd have now is just an insane price. And the value you would have now is actually pretty crazy. So there are three that I know of that are CGC graded. The number 2 is a 9.6, and that would be, I don't know, like a $200,000 book, something like that. The 5 is a CGC 9.4. It's the first Doctor Doom, CGC 9.4, White Mountain pedigree. That's like what, $250,000, $300,000 book? I don't know. It might be somebody's grail. I mean, it's kind of mine, but I'm not going to sell my house to buy it. But it'd be crazy if that showed up. And the 7 is a 9.4. I haven't found any other copies, so that grade estimate seems like ridiculously tight. But it was just a bulk lot, 2 to 10. There's all these keys in here. It's like the dawn of the Marvel age, right? It's like dawn of 616. There's like keys every issue, and all we get is like, oh, here's a group lot, 2 to 10. Estimate $14,000 to $19,000. Yeah. So I mean, the 5 would be on the cover of a heritage auction. Like, even if they had like a $5 million book, they might put that on because it's like such a cornerstone of the hobby. I don't know. It's crazy. Okay, here we go. I'm going to talk about this again. I'm not going to stop talking about this book. I've been talking about this book for 30 years. Daredevil number 1, White Mountain. And it's sold in a huge group. They didn't even break out the number of Daredevil number 1. It was 1 to 7, 12, 13, 21, 23, 26, 34, and 36. It's like, I don't know. Can somebody sell me this book? Can somebody find it? Can somebody tell me if it still exists? This has been my most wanted book for decades. And the 7, which I've never talked about, the 7 is probably right up there, right? So like 1 and 7 are obviously in the two big keys in the run. And I've never really talked about in the same way as because I have a photo of the number 1. I don't have a photo of the number 7. So I'm just curious, like, would I have been like banging on about the 7 if I had a photo of it? From now on, I'm going to keep, mentioning to people like, hey, if you find the Daredevil number 1 or the number 7 from the White Mountain collection, hit me up. But again, huge group. Either of those books would be like a headliner. They'd be in the featured section of a heritage auction. I don't know. But just as a note, none of these books. So I've had the opportunity to buy some of the later books in the run. And I can tell you for a fact that I've never seen any of these come up for sale. So as far as I know, they've been tied up in a collection for 31 years. So hopefully they are, and hopefully, that person decides that they want to buy a Malibu beach house, and they're going to consign these to Heritage, and they're not going to forget that they're White Mountain. That's the thing that scares me, actually, is that these books were bought by a collector who maybe didn't keep great notes. They pass away. Their family doesn't necessarily know what they have. And unless, the people at CGC or Heritage or Comic Connect or Comic Link or whatever are astute and kind of put 2 and 2 together, they may just get listed as like, Daredevil number 1, CGC 9.4 without the pedigree. We'll find out. Or maybe we won't. I don't know. But, I've always worried about that. It's like it could come up for sale and not actually be noted. But, I mean, the good news is there are notations on the front cover of this one. If I saw it, I would know what it was because it got the 64 under the number. But, I don't know. I've gone on too long about this book, but it gets me excited, so I can't help it. Here's another one. So this is funny. So Tales of Suspense 39 White Mountain Pedigree. So when I started putting this list together, I realized that I didn't know why I had it listed as a CGC 9.6. I have it noted twice. I have this, Silver Age book, the pedigree census, of all the Silver Age pedigrees and what keys are in them and what grades they have. And it's in the $100,000 club, of course. And in both, I listed it as a CGC 9.6. And I don't know why, or I didn't know why. I couldn't find a record of it. But I asked on the CGC forum, and people pointed out that it's Tom Berlotto's book. And either he mentioned it in his short-lived entrance onto the CGC forum, or somebody like Doug, who would know, mentioned it there, and I saw it there. There was also a Scoop article that mentioned that there's a 9.6 Tales of Suspense 39. So I figured that one out. But it was like, it's one of those things where you get these data points, and then unless it's like in an email or on the forum or something, I don't necessarily know where I got it sometimes, which really bothers me. So, but I figured this one out, so I'm safe. So, we've gone through some of the White Mountains. We've gone through the pay copy of Marvel 1. We've seen 12 Watchmen covers. And of course, we couldn't go, and especially at this time when Gaines copies were coming to market and being traded more regularly. I mean, they're still traded a lot, but they were kind of fresher to market at this point. So they sold the number 2 Gaines file set in group lots. I've got the Frontline Combat and Tales from the Crypt pictured here. For those of you unfamiliar with the story of the Gaines file copies, it was Bill Gaines. He kept 15 copies of every book he published, kept them in file cabinets in New York. That's why they don't have the greatest paper quality, but they are, a lot of them are just pristine books because he just pulled copies off of the printing press, basically, and tossed them in a file copy. So when the Gaines file copies were coming to market, Jerry Weist and Bob Oberstreet graded the books and ranked them in sets based on conditions. The number 1 set was the best condition, the number 2 set was the second best, and so on. Over the years, of course, we've had them CGC graded, and those aren't always, the number 1 books are not always the best copy, but they're generally pretty good. Like it was Bob Overstreet and Jerry Weist. They had some idea of what they were doing. But it's interesting. So as you can see here, the number 2 Frontline Combat set was sold. It must have been kept together, graded, and then in 2010 sold at Heritage. As you can see here, maybe you can see, depending on if you're on your phone or whatever, they actually did a pretty good job grading these. So the numbers are, with the exception of the 14 is the 7.0, and I should get the grader's notes on that one to kind of take a look and see if there's like some obvious oh, there's a crunch in the lower left-hand corner, which means somebody just dropped it, like I dropped my car keys right there. Don't worry about it. It's fine. They'll be fine. But you're handling a book. It's and you drop the Gaines file copy of Frontline Combat 14. So that's the only dud. We got 9.6, 9.6, 9.8, 9.6, 9.4, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8, 9.8, 9.6, the 7.0, 9.8, 9.8, 9.6. So not bad. But yeah, I'm going to look at the greatest notes for that one. Maybe I'll put a short up on that. This, by the way, was the same auction where the Detective 27 CGC 8.0 sold for over $1 million, $1,075,000. So it was a big auction, a lot of excitement, a lot of conversation about this auction on the boards, and they snuck in the number 2 Frontline Combat set. So, but this is again, the quality of this auction. So the number 2 Gaines file copies were just sold as group lots. They didn't even break them out. I mean, you wouldn't have at the time, and they weren't that expensive, but from the context of today, it's just crazy. So let's look at some more art. The Watchmen covers are what they are, historic, coveted, modern comic art. But there's art from all ages in this, including art that at the time was like brand new. But we'll get to that in a minute. So how about this? Superman 233 original art by Neil Adams, $1,000 to $1,500 estimate, which seems like crazy to me. Just in the context, even in the context of the time, it seems low. You'll see there's a Schomburg page that's like, I don't know, 6 to 9 thousand. And yeah, it's golden age art, it's rare or whatever, but Neil Adams was the standard bearer for the hobby. Even more than Schomburg was, right? Schomburg was a cover artist. He wasn't Jack Kirby. Um, Neil Adams like defined the 70s. So, and this is an iconic cover featuring Superman. So, $1,000 to $1,500 is a crazy estimate, even for the time. What would this go for now? This is one of those like $500,000 front page of the Heritage Catalog, cover of the Heritage Catalog kind of pieces of art. It's certainly somebody's grail. And yeah, so the sky's the limit. And a quick scan. So one of the things, obviously not every piece of art is on Comic Art Fans, but a lot of it is, and a lot of the big kind of whale collectors are there and they share their stuff. And a quick scan there didn't show anything. There's some reproductions, but the original isn't out there. So it's not in any of the kind of usual suspects in that sense, the kind of public usual suspects' hands. There are obviously some people that are very private with their collections. And so hopefully it's sitting above somebody's couch in a position of honor because it's an amazing page. So this one, so this is $1,000. This was $1,000 to $1,500, and this was new. This was 5 years old, right, at the time, and this stuff was like easy to purchase. I stood in front of Todd McFarlane with his art for sale, like in Boston, just a couple of years before this auction, like contemporaneous with his Spider-Man #1, right? So you could buy it. And here it is at auction. It was hot. I mean, I understand why it was at auction, but that it shows you how hot it was, that it was the same estimate as the Neil Adams Superman 233 cover. Because this isn't even the most iconic of the Spider-Man covers, right? It's not the most iconic of the Spider-Man art. But it still had the same estimate as that Superman 233, which is kind of crazy. And definitely that Superman 233 would sell for more than this thing. I'm guaranteeing that. This would sell for a lot. It sold at Heritage for in 2013 for $77,000. It would sell for way more than that now, but it's not the same level of iconic as that Neil Adams cover. So, but yeah, there was a bunch of in those early auctions because of how hot people like Jim Lee and Liefeld and McFarlane were the Image guys. Their art was featured in these auctions. So, and featured prominently. So this one, this shows you what happens when things change. So this book is now a $300,000 book in 9.4. I think the 194 sold for, I don't know, $325,000 or something like that. The Man in the Red Hood. It just was not. It's a great cover. It's a really iconic cover, I think, but you wouldn't have picked it out necessarily until now, where it's become like a much bigger book in the hobby. And so I've looked at this auction catalog before, and I didn't notice that this was in there. So I'm going through the catalog like, holy cow, where'd this come from? And again, this isn't in Comic Art Fans. Not sure, not that I would know, but there's no hint as to where it would be. And I just don't know what this would sell for if it came up for auction right now. It'd be one of those, it's a great looking cover. It's not the most collected artist in the history of the world, Lou Schwartz, but key book. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. It's also fascinating that I completely missed it the first 12 times I've looked at this auction catalog. So this iconic Wolverine cover. I remember this one clearly from the collection of Graham Nash, by the way. Crosby, Stills, and Nash fame. Estimate of $500 to $1,000. So this was a bargain compared to the Amazing Spider-Man 303 cover, and certainly a bargain compared to the Neil Adams cover. Um, it was purchased by Martin Shamus. So in the auction, Martin Shamus, father of Wizard founder Gareb Shamus, bought it, and it sold 10 years ago for $41,825 when the Shamus Modern Masterpieces collection went to auction. And this page, while classic to me, is very memorable, isn't even a featured image on the Comic Art Fans page of the owner of this classic. This one is definitely in a big time collection and a public collection that you can take a look at. It's very cool, actually, the stuff that this person owns. So, but yeah, this cover isn't even on like their grid of 9 that they are most proud of. It's not bad. So here I talked about it. So Alex Schomburg, cover for All New Comics number 9. If, obviously the timely stuff is what people think about. Maybe the exciting, the Zella covers, the airbrush covers. I loved those. I still love them, but I used to collect them. But the All New, so if you're collecting the comics, his covers for All New are way cheaper than any of the classic timelies, and they're just as good. As you can see, maybe squinting, this one is nuts, but look up the book itself. All New Comics number 9. It's a World War II cover. It's got its problems when viewed through a 21st century eye, but it is just these hyper detailed, chaotic action scenes that he drew. And this is, definitely like a $100,000 page right now, if it ever resurfaced. It was a $2,500 to $3,500 original estimate. I wonder where this one went. This is the kind of thing that would have gone to like one of the like seasoned collectors, I imagine, that would have been in the auction room that day, but I can't find it anywhere, so who knows. I'd love to see it again, for sure. Okay, so we're going to end with... So I've talked about this might be the greatest comic auction of all time. So let's look at what we've got. We've got the pay copy. There was an Action 1. There was a Detective 27. All the keys. They were both restored, so I didn't mention them here. There's a bunch of White Mountain copies in addition to the ones that I've mentioned, like the whole complete run of Conan from the White Mountain collection, or the keys, the Barry Windsor Smith Conans. There's a bunch of other stuff. It's just crazy. The complete Watchmen set, the number 2 Gaines file set, all the art I just showed, like classics from Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and Neil Adams and, whatever. And then we've got the title page, the title splash from Spider-Man 39, featuring the Green Goblin in this, like the 2-parter that's a classic, beloved, ultimate Silver Age classic. And, John Romita, Spider-Man, Green Goblin. It just does not get any better than this. This is one of the most... Obviously, the cover is one thing, but for an interior page, for a splash page, this, is up there with anything in my mind, right? So, the one I love is This Man, This Monster, FF51. I love that story. It's one of Stan Lee's favorite stories. I love it personally. I have a great affinity for that. So to me, that's one of the most. But I mean, that doesn't, it's not the same as this. This is like comic history wrapped up in a bow, right? I don't know. I don't know what would compare to it. I mean, I'm sure there's some other Fantastic Four and some other Spider-Man stuff that would, but in reality, looking at what we've got in front of us, I think this is one of the best splash pages available. Certainly Silver Age splash pages. This is crazy. $1,500 to $2,000 estimate. This is $1 million page. There's just no question. This, you would have... Well, one other thing. So this is in the collection of Mike Berkey, Romita Man, one of the top original art collectors and dealers. So from that perspective, the biggest whale in the room, the person most likely to spend $1 million on it, wouldn't be there because he already owns it. But like in a world where he didn't own it, this is $1 million page, right? It's got to be. It's just got to be. Look at it. So I don't know. That's where we're at. Thanks. So like I just to finish up, like just look at the stuff that we've got, and keep in mind that I could have added another dozen lots that were just like mind blowing. Um, I just don't know. We'll see. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to continue to go through my auction catalogs. The first Sotheby's catalog is actually fascinating. The 1991, the hardcover one. And there's just other auctions from the 90s that were really great. And I'm going to run through them and kind of do this sort of exercise with them. But like honestly, this is the first one. I seized on going with this one because I just remember it being this incredible collection of comics and comic art. So, but I'm definitely gonna do this as a series to kind of break it up, the previews and the kind of looking, in detail at the ongoing auctions and stuff like that, and looking back at some of the history of the hobby. So, this has been a lot of fun for me. I hope you can tell. And thanks for if you've made it this far. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back next week with my first of probably 2 Christine Farrell collection previews. Thanks.